Catholics, like, we have this whole history of these amazing warriors, from spiritual warriors to actual warriors, like plus the Takayama Yusudo. Like, there's an actual samurai that's a saint. There are actual Vikings that are saints. Like, talking about the Kota Bushido and the samurai and how they didn't really live up to it. You can't really fully live up to it without Christ, like without Catholicism.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Catholic Martial Artist. I'm here with Brian Duncan, the creator of Catholic Fightwear. How you doing, Brian?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, good. So first question I want to ask you is, what's your background in faith and martial arts?
Yeah. So in faith is kind of a long question. I grew up in a Baptist home, so I was Protestant. Um, and I actually was pretty into my faith from a young age. I grew up and actually became a youth pastor for a little while. That was my career path, and I got into that and started interning. And around the same time, I was going to like Bible school, which is kind of like their seminary. I started studying the church fathers and really got into that and started really opening up my mind, and eventually changed tracks. But it was like probably a 10-year journey or so from me discovering the church fathers to becoming Catholic. I fought it tooth and nail till the very end. uh,
That's cool.
so yeah, that was a long journey. And then with martial arts, I've been training about 30 years now. So I started at 4. I wanted to be a Power Ranger, and
Same, same exact motivation.
right.
Yep. Power Rangers.
You grew up in the 90s too.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was like, sometimes I still want to be a Power Ranger,
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's I started out in karate. It was a traditional school. We did Koikon, which is actually somewhat made famous by Chuck Liddell through the UFC. Um, and I grew up doing that. Eventually got into, tried out some Aikido, different types of Kung Fu, stuff like that, to Judo. And now I actually run my own gym. So I have a mixed martial arts gym. We train kickboxing, wrestling, Jiu Jitsu, fitness. Um, I mean, you name it, it has to do with mixed martial arts. We've got a program running for it. So that's what we do.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've had a similar growing up. I started at 5. Started with Taekwondo. I also learned Hapkido. And then eventually when I was 20, I started boxing and kickboxing. And then when started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So kind of very similar. And Power Rangers was,
Power Rangers, right? Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
A lot of kids say that, like, like Power Rangers was the motivation. Well, that's really awesome. Um Now the follow-up question I want to ask you is, what inspired you to start Catholic Fightwear?
Yeah, I was running my own gym. I've got 7 kids, and
Wow, awesome.
6 of my 7 train. The other one is too young. She's only 9 months old.
Mhm.
And they were running around the gym, and they're getting rash guards and things for training no gi. And my kids really wanted something that was cool, and I did too. And so you look around, there's a lot of rash guards that are just it's just a color with a company brand.
Mhm.
But there's actually a company out there called Raven Fightwear, and they make some really, really cool rash guards, um, with just different prints. Like, you can get these samurai warriors on them, all these different things.
Mhm.
And some of their coolest line is, in terms of like the design aesthetic, all has to do with like mythological gods and things. And so my kids started wanting to get like, oh, we want to get like Ares and Zeus, and we want to get Hades and whatever these Egyptian gods are. And I could see why, because the designs were really, really cool. Um, and I was like, I think I could do this. Like, I could make designs that are cool and aesthetically pleasing to a fighter.
Yeah.
Uh,
Case in point, by the way, you guys, this is one of his rash guards. It's a Takayama rash guard. I literally wear it every time I go to Nogi
yeah,
because it's the coolest one. And people always ask me about it, by the way. It starts up a conversation, which I think is good for like evangelizing too.
yeah,
Because like
oh
I'll
yeah,
have like there's literally like a couple weekends ago, I was going to a belt promotion, and the guy, we've been talking a little bit, and he starts bringing up saying things like, I haven't been to mass in a while. And I was like, you should go. And it starts a conversation. So keep going. I
Yeah.
just wanted to
Oh
mention
yeah, yeah.
this is your
No,
shirt.
it's
So
funny. That was the thing is I wanted rash guards that were really cool because there really aren't a lot out there. Like Raven Fightwear is a big one. There's another company called X Marshall, and they do a lot of funny. They have some really cool ones, but also some funny ones. Like one of my students works at Waffle House, and so I bought him a Waffle House rash guard,
yeah.
a White House or something. And so there's different ones that are kind of funny. And I
Mhm.
wanted that aesthetic. Like I wanted to go to a competition and have people say, "Wow, I really like your rash guard. Where did you get that?"
Yeah.
And I wanted my kids to feel proud about wearing them. And I just thought, Catholics, like we have this whole history of these amazing warriors, from spiritual warriors to actual warriors, like Blessed Takayama used to. Like that's like, there's an actual samurai that's a saint. There are actual Vikings that are saints. Like, and you're talking warrior class people. And Saint Michael, you got all these people, so it's just really cool. And so I started it started out kind of like as a tease thing, and I just made up some designs and had them printed just for my kids. And then my gym is actually about 85% Catholic, which is
Wow.
huge. And so I start bringing these designs in, and all these people, hey, we want them, hey, we want them. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to start sourcing them. And it kind of just grew from there, and now it's this small company. My wife and I actually run a toy company, and so
Okay.
a lot of the business know-how and connections we had. And it's funny because I'm hoping and kind of thinking that the Fightwear company will outgrow it, and that'll be my main business. But I've had the same experience. Like we actually took 18 kids to a tournament about a month ago, and probably 12 adults or so. And like almost every person from my gym had a rash guard on that came from Catholic Fightwear, and everybody liked them. And there's all these comments like, and the amount of people that we were able to talk to, like, oh, Catholic Fightwear, like, what is that? Why are you guys Catholic? And it's kind of interesting to
Yeah.
be, like you said, it starts up a conversation and gets people thinking. So
That's awesome. 85% of your school is Catholic. That's cool.
yeah,
That's a cool
crazy.
statistic.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
it's shrinking a little as we grow.
Mhm.
But like my gym, it kind of has a cool story. I ran a gym in Michigan, and it shut down during COVID, and I moved down to Tennessee
Mhm.
for a variety of reasons, and I had no intention of doing it. And then I got down here, and we started going to mass at this parish, and one of the guys there owns this building downtown, and he was like, "Hey, um, I want my kids to learn martial arts. Like, will you teach them?" And I was like, "I'm not going to run a gym. No." Like, there's places, go figure it out. And he kept bugging me. And I was like, well, I don't have money to pay rent, because now he started ganging up, like him and other people in the parish. And everybody's like, yeah, we want a Catholic to teach them. We want this. And I was like, well, I don't have money to like pay rent. He was like, yeah, just have the space. Just have it for free. Get it going, build it up, and, see where it goes. And it was a little like small 650 square foot room, and within a year we outgrew it, and we're now in this big like 3,800 square foot building, and we're slowly outgrowing that, all because this guy was just like, hey, I'm gonna like just come have this space, try it out. And like the whole parish is like I said, 85% of our students come from one of two parishes in the area.
That's awesome, man. That's divine providence for
Yeah,
sure.
right.
Yeah, God wanted you to have a school and
That's what I think. Yeah,
evangelize
yeah.
for sure. Yeah, that's awesome, man. I actually I don't know the population of Catholics in my school currently. I have a lot of Hispanics though. I do have a big picture of Takayama in my school
That's
with like a
cool. Yeah.
little QR code where people can scan and read about him. Um, but yeah, I kind of started like as far as like getting a space, like I went to like another gym, um, who I at the time I had no money, so I couldn't like pay for rent. And he was like, "Don't worry about it, just pay me later." And I was like, "Dang, that's so generous," you know? It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's crazy when you find those generous people, and you kind of get started. And
Yeah.
sometimes people are like, hey, how did you get started? I just asked.
Yeah, exactly. And people ask me that too. It's like, how do you start? And I was like, you just go around, ask if anyone has extra space they're not using.
Yeah, I mean, the worst they're gonna do is say no,
Yeah, and you
and
won't know
then you
until
go
you
ask
ask.
someone else.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, ask someone else, right? Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's really cool. Um,
yeah. It's been neat though. We've had a couple people come to the gym who are Catholic but not really practicing, and just
yeah.
because of the community that we have, and like the rash guard company and everything, it's like now we've got t-shirts, and I'm kind of trying to branch out into fitness and stuff like that. And so I've been able to actually get people like going back to mass. Like, hey, you grew up Catholic, but like, have you been going to mass?
That's
And
awesome,
it's just a
man.
whole different thing. So it's been a lot of fun that way.
That's awesome. That's so remarkable. That's awesome. That's like uh God's using your business to bring people back home, which is
Yeah.
wonderful. That's
Yeah. And
so
I think, even more so the community, like it really helps because there's just having so many in one space. It's like, I don't know, you can kind of peer pressure them in, right?
hell
Like,
yeah, for
hey,
sure.
you
For
used
sure,
to go to
man.
mass, come back. Like, we'll go to
Yeah,
mass
and
with you.
I
And
mean, and there's also like, I mean, I'm sure you've been part of this. Like I've been part of gyms where it's like, I'm in a really good gym now and I really like it, but there's some atmosphere in some gyms where you're encouraged to do like negative stuff,
oh yeah,
like to fit in, you
yeah.
know.
I talk about that. I don't know if you follow my Twitter a lot, but I put a lot of thoughts out there on sports and stuff, and like that's one of like the negative aspects, especially of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. It's a lot more prevalent. Like they have those things like the mat enforcer, or like you're supposed to go around and bully people, or like keep them in line. Some it's
Yeah.
just use words and be adults, and like let's be nice. And yeah, I agree. It's been really nice because ours it's a very family atmosphere, and it's there's everybody's very kind. There's not any like promiscuity going around. The language is clean, the music is clean, which is something that's hard to find. I remember trying to take my kids around the area to find a new gym, and it's like you walk in and they've just got awful music blasting over
Oh
the,
yeah.
and you're like, well, we're not going to train here if that's what you do. And it's so it's kind of neat. And but at the same time, one of the things we're trying to show is like you can have a good gym culture and be kind, and I guess have good virtues, but still be highly competitive. And so we've
Mhm.
got a couple guys that are coming up that are gonna start some amateur MMA careers. We've been going around jiu-jitsu and kickboxing competitions. We tend to place really, really well, and it's just neat to be like, yeah, you don't have to have that bad culture, right? You can
Yeah.
still train well and be nice.
I know, man. And like like even with Takayama, like I'm sure like like the Kota Bushido, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So the Kota Bushido is like, it's kind of romanticized how samurai were, but they actually weren't like that good.
Right,
They're
yeah.
pretty terrible people. But when I read like the Kota Bushido, it's like Takayama was the guy that actually followed it. Like if
Right.
you look at his life, like he was a badass because he was a samurai. He was like one of the most respected like military people of his time. So much so that even Hideyoshi didn't want to like, get rid of him, even though he was
Yeah.
like, you know, a Catholic.
Yep.
Um, but
Which
he,
was banned at the time, right? Like that was illegal.
yeah, yeah. And he had one wife. He didn't go around like a lot of the other samurai did.
Hmm.
Um, he was very loyal to even the rulers that were oppressing him, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, he's like the example of, and that's why I'm so glad. Like when I saw your rash guard of Takayama, I was like, yes, somebody understands. You can be a legit martial artist. You can be really tough and have a lot of skill, but also a virtuous person. And they're not like
Right.
exclusive,
They're not, right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
it's interesting because as a kid, I was always really drawn to the Kota Bushido. And like I remember watching The Last Samurai and really getting into it. And like it really resonated with me, like these ideas, self-control, controlling your passions, exemplifying virtues. But like you said, you start studying about samurais and you find out they're actually were pretty awful people
Yeah.
historically. And like the war crimes and like raping women and children and like just
Hmm.
all the different things that, I mean, it's a fallen world, right? It's not like they're doing the same things everyone else around the world was. And
Yeah.
yeah, I loved like after I became Catholic and started thinking about Catholic Fightwear, I just started Googling and I was like, I wonder if there's a samurai. And
Yeah.
Takayama came up and I was like, oh man, this is so cool. And I've got translations of some of his books now. And like, like he wrote a lot. And it's interesting because I agree. He was like the actual, like the only real samurai, like
Hmm.
actually taming his passions and living a virtuous life. And yeah, so
Yeah.
it's pretty
That's
cool.
cool,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, that's yeah, even when I look up Blessed Takayama, I see your Catholic Fightwear show up. It like
Do you?
shows up.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
I'm all the
right.
way in Texas, so I know it's I see your rash guard showing up, which is
Yeah,
awesome.
that's
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah.
that's
So
great.
I hope more people find it. So
Yeah, yeah, no, dude, I tell people about it all the time, you know. Um, awesome. Well, my next question for you is we kind of brushed about this a little bit, but what similarities do you see with Catholicism and martial arts?
yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that. You sent me the questions, and I was like, one of the things that comes up in my mind first is um, that I always like to kind of emphasize that, like, I'm not the first person to think that Catholicism and martial arts go together. Like it all the way back, you're looking at Saint Paul, talks about shadow boxing,
Mm,
and beating your body into submission, and like training it like a fighter or a soldier would train their body. And then you have in Ephesians where he's running through the armor of God, right? And he's equating the spiritual life and warfare to the warfare of a soldier. And and so it's like there's just a lot to be drawn there. And I think those ideas of like self-discipline, mastering over your body, your mind, learning to force yourself to kind of do hard things, uncomfortable things, all in the name of building virtue is kind of a commonality between the two. um,
mhm.
the one thing I think, like, talking back, we were talking about the code of Bushido and the samurai and how they didn't really live up to it. Is I feel like you can't really fully live up to it without Christ, like without Catholicism. And so it's like I get some people that are like, "Oh man,
Alexa,
you're
stop. I'm
you're
sorry
always,
about that.
oh yeah, you're good.
Sorry.
You're always trying to like draw in like, oh, you can be a good person through martial arts, and because I talk a lot about that on Twitter. Is like, if you train jiu-jitsu, you train kickboxing, like it helps you develop and become a better person. Because I think generally it's true, but it's like, no, I'm not excluding Christ and the mass and the church, because I think those things are a huge fulfillment. And um like, if you really really want to become that, you have to have those things in life. And we have a lot of popes that actually have agreed and spoken on that. Like Saint Pope Saint John Paul II talked a lot about the development of that sports gives to character, and how, when it's rightly understood, he says, when it's rightly understood, it's an occupation of the whole perfect, perfecting the body as an instrument of the mind, and it makes the mind itself a more refined instrument for the search and communication of truth. um, and I really think that's true. Like, in of all the sports that are out there, I think martial arts is probably top tier in actually accomplishing that. And so it's because you have the similarities, like in martial arts, like, in jiu-jitsu, I mean, you go roll and you just get squished under somebody for 5 minutes, and it's
Yeah.
awful and it's miserable. And there's like similarities between that and penance and fasting, and it's like it pushes your mind and develops you. And I've drawn on those experiences so much myself, just like, hey, I don't want to fast today. Like, I feel so weak. I'm so tired. Like, I just want to eat meat, or I want to, break the fast. And it's like, no, you kind of remember, like, if I can get squished by a guy for 5 minutes and figure out how to get it out and come out and not tap, I think I can go without eating, right? Like,
Hmm. Yeah.
it seems a little easier. Sometimes it's not, but
Yeah. No, man, I understand. Yeah, that makes total sense, especially that quote from St. Pope John Paul II. I'm gonna have to look that up now and like
yeah, I'll just send it.
copy it.
There's
Yeah.
actually, like, I feel like it's not well thought about, but there's a lot that the church has taught through encyclicals and even back through the church fathers in terms of viewing sports and what sports are for, and how useful they are for evangelization, and the development of character. Um, and so I think it's totally worth looking into.
Yeah. Yeah, and even during the Crusades, there were, like the Knights Templar and stuff like that. And, it's part of developing. And I think too, like I meet a lot of guys who are fighters and they're just like I can tell they're putting fighting as this ultimate thing in their life, and that they want to get to the top and they want to make that their like thing. And
Yeah,
then I've seen like my best friend, he's recently converted to Orthodoxy, praying he becomes Catholic, but it's a start. So
yeah,
he's had ambitions of being a fighter. He's doing really well, and then um he just started to realize, like, after a few losses, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm not, I'm putting myself as the center of the universe, not something else. And if I worship myself, that's going to break down and get, crumble, because that's what that does to you when you train. Like you're not going to be invincible forever. Like you
Right. Yeah.
might, like he was on a winning streak and he was like feeling invincible, and then it gets kind of like stopped. And he was just telling me like, that actually drew him closer to God, and that made him realize like he's
Yeah.
not as invincible as he thought he was. And jiu-jitsu teaches you that. Like you're
Oh, yeah.
always going to get beaten by somebody else. You're never gonna, unless you're Gordon Ryan. But
Yeah. It's funny because I think a lot of people think martial artists have really, especially jujitsu guys, are like really pompous and think they're way better than everybody and so tough and invincible. Like I've never met a group of more humble people, because day in and day out you go get your butt kicked on the mat, and
Mhm.
it's like, and like I talk to my students all the time. It's like you have people come in, and I got a black belt in karate and in our kickboxing program. I'm just a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. And so it's like you're right in the middle. And so you get these guys come in with blue belts from other gyms to visit, and they just want to murder you.
Oh
And
yeah.
you get like brown belts, and they want to roll real hard because they don't want to lose to you. And so you're in this quasi place where like everybody hates you. And it's like I get nervous like when people come in, because it's impossible to be pompous, because there are blue belts who walk in the door who I can't touch. Like they just murder me because they train so much, so often.
Mhm.
They're a lot younger than I am. And so like I said, you end up losing. And it's funny. Like I think the more you know about fighting and combat, the more you're just like, yeah, I don't think I'm the best in the world.
No, no, just avoid it. Just avoid
I
it.
don't want to fight anybody.
Yeah. I know, and that's healthy too, because like, there's a lot of I like, at least where I live, there's a lot of school fights that go on.
Mhm.
Especially in high school, and I tell my high school students about it and stuff like that. And you know, the more they train, the same thing. Like the less they're like, at first, they come in with these ideas like, oh, I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna like, defend myself, and stuff like that. And then they start training, they're like, oh, this is actually a lot more brutal than I thought. You
Yeah.
know, it's like getting put up in a corner, with gloves on. You have gloves and you have headgear, but still, it's imagine if
Yeah.
those were fists, and
Yeah.
you know, but
Yeah, I ran security for a little while. Worked in security and got in actual live fights, and it's like, no thanks. I don't want to do that again. Um, it was a great experience in certain ways, but like it's terrifying because it's not the same as like there's no tapping out, there's no
yeah.
ref, like you never know what's going to happen, and a lot of people just don't realize like the luck that's involved in fighting, where it's like just
Yep.
random chance somebody, doesn't matter how much more skilled you are, they happen to catch you with a lucky clip on the chin with their fist, and down you go.
That
And
reminds me of the Max Holl. Did you see that, the Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje,
yeah,
that last like 1 second
one
left?
second left.
I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
he's not lucky. They're very, very skilled. They made it look like a lucky punch, but man, that was like,
yeah. I mean, just as the time is running. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that happens. It's fun
mhm.
because when you watch the fight, it's like I feel like the 10-second timer hit, right, because it
Yeah.
does the little clap, and so the fighters know like I got 10 seconds, and they both just like started wailing on each other, and it's like one of them just squeaked it in 1 second to go.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, it happens. It's crazy. So
Yeah, and I guess another similarity that I saw, like when I because I kind of went through like a reversion experience. Like I grew up Catholic. Well, I didn't grow up Catholic. I converted to Catholicism when I was 11. Ironically, the same age Takayama got into the church, which kind of drew me to listening to his story. But I kind of left my faith a little bit, became really lukewarm, and then I got a really bad injury in my shoulder that made me rethink a lot of things.
mhm.
And when I went back to training after I started like growing in my faith again, I started to realize like there are things you do in martial arts, like the drilling, the repetition, that you feel like doesn't really get you anywhere until you start sparring. And I kind of think that's like how you deal with temptation. Like you'll say these prayers, you'll go to mass, you'll do these acts of penance, and then you'll be like, I don't know what this is amounting to because I don't see a direct, it's kind of like working out too. Like you'll work out after the day one, you're not going to see like all the fat go away, you know,
Right. Yeah. There's
you're
no
not going to
gain.
see anything. So I kind of felt that way praying the rosary, like I'm not feeling anything. And I think this is like a lot of, a dangerous thing that a lot of people like, they only pray when they feel good and
Hmm.
things feel right. And I was like, I started to see like, okay, there's days I really don't feel like drilling this move over and over, but I know I have to because I keep making the mistake over and over.
Yeah.
Um, but then suddenly it just clicks, right? And I'm sure you do that as an instructor, right? You tell your students, hey, you have to do this over and over, and they're probably like, okay, I got to do this, you know,
Yep. This boring thing over and
over
over.
and over. And then finally, when they're rolling and they pull it off, and you're just like, see, and then they're like, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah. No, there's definitely something to that. Like I remember coming in to the Catholic faith, and even as a Protestant, a lot of people talk this way where it's their faith is very emotively based. So it's like when I feel holy, when I feel happy, when I feel like praying, that's when I do. They feel God speaking to them. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's like what happens in the days when you don't. A lot of times those
Mhm.
people, they don't have much. And that's one of the things I love about the rosary or the liturgy of the hours is what I pray every day. And it's like it's just like it's there, it's written, it's prescripted, you just do it, it's repetitive. And so sure, it can get boring, but it's like when I wake up and I'm like, I don't feel like praying today, it's like, well, just read it because it's right there, just do it. And like you said, it really helps you out. And I agree, like there's no you don't always notice the gains right then and there. Like I don't always feel like God is talking to me or, working in my heart in some way just because I'm praying the liturgy of the hours right now. But I agree, like it's an exercise, and a year from now, if you do that every single day, you'll feel stronger. You'll resist temptation better. You'll be a more virtuous person than if you only wait for the days where you feel like it, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's that whole you get all those people. I've seen a lot of people online kind of starting to differentiate the idea between like discipline and motivation. And like I have a poster up in my gym that talks about that, how discipline beats motivation every time. Because if you just wait till you're motivated,
Yeah.
you'll never do it, or you'll be really inconsistent. Discipline doesn't care. It doesn't care how you feel when you wake up. It doesn't care
Mhm.
if you're motivated. It doesn't care if you're good at it, bad at it. You just do it because it
Yeah.
has to be done.
That's cool, man. Yeah. I mean, as far as like praying the rosary too, like I realized this the other day, um, that the rosary is actually like a cycle of your life in a way. Like especially like in the spiritual life, you're gonna have times where you're joyful to pray, times
Yeah,
where you're really dry, which is like the sorrowful mysteries, which is kind of what Jesus experienced, you know. Why
yeah,
has thou forsaken me? Like that's dryness, right? And then, but what comes out of that is glory, right? So you're kind
yeah,
of going through this cycle of, which is why I think our Lady like told us like this is the battering ram, you know, as he said to as she said to Saint Dominic, like this will destroy heresies, this will change the world because you're constantly going through this cycle, and it reminds you that like okay, if I'm going through this dry period, it's gonna come around at the end, and
yeah.
it does every time, you know.
Every time, right? Yeah,
Yeah, every time, you know. And yeah, dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. Let me see. So I have one more question for you,
yeah.
and I think I know the answer, but maybe I'll be surprised. Who's your favorite saint?
It's actually not Blessed Justo Ukon Takayama.
Okay.
I really like him and have kind of developed a devotion to him recently. But my favorite saint is actually Francis de Sales.
Hmm.
Um, and that's my confirmation saint. And the reason that is Francis de Sales is the reason I converted. Um, so I grew up Protestant, and he has a nickname, the missionary to the Protestants. He lived in Geneva, which is the area of John Calvin, who was a very prominent Reformation figure. There's a whole sect of Protestantism named after him called Calvinism. And I kind of grew up in that space. I was what's called a Reformed Calvinist. And it's like there were so many hurdles I couldn't come over, and it was Francis de Sales' writings on our mother that he had this whole. It's a book that's out there that you can get his homilies on Our Lady, and it's some like 100 homilies or something like that. And like reading those and meditating on his writings about her is the reason I joined the Catholic Church. And so that's like my devotion to Francis is all the time, like every day, because my whole family, all my friends that I grew up with, they're all still Protestant. They think we're crazy. Some of them don't talk to us anymore. And so Francis de Sales is like, that's who I pray to all the time for those people.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I have an introduction to the devout life. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
that
it's yeah, he's wonderful. And I think you mentioned you had to overcome the hurdle of Mary, right?
yeah,
And I think a lot of Protestants, have a hard time with that. And I to a certain extent, I was raised Catholic, but um there was a time where I was just like, do I really like what's all this like we're pushing Mary a little too much. And I think a lot of people um run into that, but if they look with an open mind like you did about, okay, what does the church actually teach about Mary? Because a lot of people do this, and I hear it gets so frustrating. Like I kind of wish I had some auto comment thing that just could just repeat this over and over. But a lot of people say like, oh, you guys worship Mary. And it's like, we don't. For the millionth time, we don't
yeah,
worship Mary, you know? Um, but I get it because on the
yeah,
outside,
yeah. I think there's,
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's a lot of like yeah, misrepresentation on people from the exterior who are just looking in, and they're interpreting it through their own lens rather than listening to what we say. I think there's also there's a lot of miscommunication. There's been poor catechesis in the church throughout history, like, and and so I think sometimes, like, even when I was going through RCIA, I would hear like the deacons like teach certain things in the class where I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, hold on, let's go back to the catechism because you're actually wrong.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're not trying to be mean, but it's like it's important for us to speak the truth of the church, to let the church speak for herself, really. And it's like,
Hmm.
she has been so clear in the teachings of the catechism or in the magisterial documents, like we need to speak the truth there and not what we want the church to say. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, that was one of the things I think Francis de Sales was really helpful to me about, was like, come hear what Our Lady has to say for herself. Come hear what our mother, the church, has to say of Our Lady, and come hear, what God has to say of her, as opposed to what the Protestants are saying. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a quote by Fulton Sheen who said something along the lines of they're not 100 people, something like they're not 100 people who I'm gonna butcher the quote now. Is
I know the way you're talking about. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
basically there's a lot of people who think they know what the Catholic Church teaches, but they actually don't. I
yeah,
totally butchered that quote, but
yeah. It's something like there's not 100 people who like who hate the Catholic Church, but there are, or maybe there's not one person who hates the Catholic Church, but there are hundreds of people who hate what they think the Catholic Church is.
yes, yeah,
Something
you're
like
right.
that. Where
That
it's
sounds
like,
way better than what I just said. I was
I don't know
misquoting
that I
it.
did it on there either, but that's the idea, right? Yeah, is people are really just angry with what they think the church teaches and not so much what she actually
The
does.
actual teachers,
And
yeah.
that was actually my conversion process, was like, that's what it was. Like, I had become Lutheran because there's a lot of similarities there. And but I couldn't become Catholic because I just couldn't get over that hurdle in my mind. And the group that I was a part of, um I was talking with one of my friends who was a pastor, who was like, hey, help me write this book on how to convert Catholics to Lutheranism, and like something that we want to publish so that Lutherans are prepared to and equipped to talk to Catholics and basically defeat their arguments and doctrines, and convince them to convert.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, cool, all right, let's do it. And so I start looking into it, and I'm like, well, if we're gonna do this, I'm gonna read the catechism, because like we gotta quote the catechism, and we gotta be really honest about, this is what they teach and here's why it's false. And then I started reading the catechism. I was just like, I just don't disagree with this. I don't disagree with that either. And I have
That's
questions
awesome.
about that, but I don't think I disagree with it.
That's great. That's awesome. That's so funny, man. That's that you're not the only one that does that though. There's
Right?
people that do
Yeah.
that all the time. Like recently a priest at our parish was talking about there's a guy, I can't remember his name, but in the 1920s, he was an atheist And he was like, you know what? I'm sick about all this talk of the resurrection. I'm gonna go out and prove it wrong. And he was like a well-known like scientist and everything. And then when he does his research, he says, you know what? I'm wrong. The resurrection actually happened. You know, in his pursuit to like try to like find the truth, he found the truth.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's
That's so
crazy.
funny. Yeah. I think that happens to more people than we think.
I think so. I think so. And some people just don't want to, they don't want to admit it. It's like, you know. Well, that's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come out here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where can
Thanks for having
everyone
me.
where can everyone find Catholic Fightwear stuff?
Yeah, Catholic Fightwear is it's on catholicfightwear.com. You can also follow me on Instagram, Catholic Fightwear, and on Twitter, Catholic. I think it's Catholic Fightwear as well, or Catholic Fight, something like that.
We'll put
Yeah,
links in the description for
yeah,
everybody.
you got to look for the cool logo on your rash guard there, and
Oh, wait,
which side? There we go.
this one, right? Yeah, this
Yep,
one right here.
CF Catholic Fightwear. Like I said, I've got some just regular apparel. We've got rash guards. I'm working on like a line of fight wear for just exercising. So we've got some like workout shorts and t-shirts and things, and just trying to make it something for everyone who's kind of into fitness and health and stuff like that, but is Catholic and wants to kind of rep what's going on. I've also got, they're a little behind, but we've got short sleeve rash guards coming in. They were supposed to be here at the beginning of the month, but they're not here yet. So
Okay, cool. Looking forward to that.
yeah. So, but
Awesome.
yeah, check it out.
Cool.
Follow me and yeah, send me some DMs or something.
Yeah. Awesome, everyone. Well, thank you everyone for watching. If you guys like this video, give it a thumbs up and be sure to follow Brian. I'll put the links in the description below. Hope you guys have a blessed day and God bless.